In the middle of the vast ocean, a giant aircraft lands on the deck, creating a majestic and solemn scene. The elite army of the Shenlong Temple stands solemnly to salute Deep, then to report that all tasks have been prepared. The young man with a dusty hairstyle gives orders to his entourage to return to Jiangdu with him. All subordinates respond in unison decisively. The person who just gave the order is the legendary war god Deep Fong. Private jets follow each other, gliding quickly on the sea surface as if to tear the space apart. He opens the news on his phone, then fixes his eyes on the screen with a face full of confusion about a strange image. On the screen appears an image of a beautiful woman standing with a strange man, making his mind troubled. At the international airport of Jiangdu City, the crowd starts to talk about the mysterious guest who just arrived. They cannot help but be amazed at the spectacular scene that the cousin of Vong Sam just set up. 6 of the most advanced B-75 fighter jets of the country are on escort duty, making anyone who witnesses it stunned. Tuvan stands there with otherworldly beauty while Vong Sam keeps boasting about his illustrious background. The beautiful girl shows a cold attitude to the words of her fiancé, then questions the identity of that cousin. Vong Sam proudly boasts that the Lam family in the capital is a famous family with unparalleled power. The old master of the Lam family is respected by the world, called Tai Sun Bak Do in the military system. Although he has retired, he can still make rain and wind through his students who hold major responsibilities. Tuvan just crosses her arms and responds with a short sound instead of a reply. Vong Sam feels uncomfortable in his heart and secretly curses this woman as a mean person. He tells himself to wait until after the engagement ceremony tomorrow to punish her so she knows what manners are. Right then, a gallant young man walks over with 2 bodyguards following behind his back. Vong Sam sees that person and yells excitedly and runs over to shake hands and greet very enthusiastically. He quickly introduces Tuvan as his fiancée so everyone knows. The young man who just arrived secretly compliments the girl in front of him for possessing a rare and beautiful appearance. Vong Sam continues to praise his cousin for being escorted by a mighty fleet of fighter jets. Tuvan's eyes suddenly change with surprise when she sees the face of the man who just appeared. She is shocked and mutters to herself a sentence that no one can hear clearly. Vong Sam looks straight at Deep, then with a mocking and contemptuous tone. He is stunned when he realizes that the person in front of him is the loser who ran away many years ago. Lam Veen sees Deep, then and his face suddenly becomes pale and sweat starts to bead on his forehead. He understands clearly why there are 6 fighter jets escorting this man. Deep then is the legend that makes all war gods in the world have to respect and bow their heads. Vong Sam accuses Deep then of abandoning the Tu family, making them fall into a great disaster after her father passed away 5 years ago. Tuvan runs away from the scene in pain because she thinks that this man has truly heartlessly abandoned her. Vong Sam has not had time to say anything else when he sees Lam Veen bowing respectfully to greet Deep Than. The truth in front of his eyes makes him feel so surprised that he cannot believe what he is seeing. Lam Veen performs a grand ceremony, then introduces himself as a person of the Lam family in the capital coming to pay respects to Deep Than. He keeps an expressionless face, then coldly responds that you have recognized the wrong person. Lam Veen feels scared and reminds himself not to let the true identity of Deep Than be revealed. He hurriedly apologizes and admits that he really saw the wrong person during his haste. Vong Sam crosses his arms triumphantly, thinking that a loser like him can never know young Master Lam. A slap lands hard on the face of Vong Sam, making him feel pain while holding his mouth that is bleeding. Lam Veen shouts and orders him to be silent immediately to maintain etiquette. He sits down on the ground and complains why his cousin treated him so cruelly. Lam Veen points his finger straight at his face and declares that from now on the Lam family no longer has any relationship with the Vong family. He does not hesitate to scold him as a damned bastard right in front of everyone. On the luxurious car, a beautiful and stylish girl is reporting to Deep Than about the incidents of the past. Tamuk Kai falls seriously ill, making the Tu family weak while the Vong family rises like a kite in the wind. He quietly looks at the materials in his hand while the girl continues to tell about important events. The cancer of the head of the Tu family is miraculously cured, making everyone amazed. On the contrary, Devan suffers from a strange disease and Vong Sam is the one who found a famous doctor to cure her and then set the engagement from then on. Deep then silently reminisces about the time 5 years ago. To save the life of Demuk Kai, he accepted the conditions of that mysterious old man to leave Jiangdu to learn extraordinary skills. He truly kept his promise to cure the serious illness for the elder of the family. However, that life-saving merit was silently stolen by the Vong family as their own. He mutters in his mouth full of anger about the meanness of the Vong family. The girl beside him continues to report that she has carefully investigated the matter of Devan frequently visiting high-end hotels with Vong Sam. She calls Devan's sister-in-law and explains that they go there to find a high-level physician to treat the disease. Deep then responds in a deep tone that he has never doubted the character of Devan. The girl suddenly calls his name, then asks about the next plan of the two. He asks the driver to drive to the cemetery in Tay Sun because he wants to return to visit the grave of his mother. When he sets foot there, both graves are already empty and the stone stele is smashed to pieces. His face is burning with killing intent along with blood streaks clearly showing, making the girl who goes with him not help but fear and cry, calling his name. Under the grave there is only foul-smelling mud left, as if the culprit intentionally smeared the resting place of his parents. He stands in front of the portrait of his parents, then blames himself for being an unfilial son for letting them suffer such great humiliation. The hand of Deep then clenches until it bleeds, then he roars, asking his subordinates to quickly investigate the person behind the heinous crime. This feud, he swears, will never share the sky with the person who caused it. Suddenly he spits out a mouthful of fresh blood, then falls backward, making the girl rush to support him. She worriedly exclaims that Deep then has been angry to the point of fainting. She quickly uses the phone to contact subordinates to inform the bad news to the Shenlong temple. The parents of the owner have suffered horrific humiliation, making him choke to the point of being comatose. She orders that no matter who the opponent is or how powerful the force is, the Shenlong temple must exterminate the entire family. At the international airport of Jiangdu, it is raining heavily while the super experts of the Shenlong temple gather simultaneously. Li Qin is the commander of the southern military region, seeing this scene and cannot help but worry about a disaster about to happen. He understands clearly that these powerful people just need to gather and are strong enough to destroy a small kingdom. He approaches the man named Hak Long to inquire about the reason for this majestic battle formation. Hak Long is famous for being rough, so he does not explain much but grabs the collar of Li Qin, then questions him angrily. The grave of the parents of Deep then was dug up, causing him to be internally injured and faint, so how can they sit still without coming? All members of the Shenlong temple carry in their hearts extreme hatred and shout the slogan "Killed" to demand justice. Li Qin stammers and asks who dares to do such an inhumane thing, causing others to be angry without regret for their lives. Hak Long throws him to one side, then warns that this is a deep-sea feud of the Longthan temple, so he had better not interfere. Another person also speaks up with a cold, icy tone, asking him never to step in if he does not want to suffer unfortunate consequences. Li Qin hurriedly bows respectfully and promises not to interfere in this matter. He also promises to cooperate fully to help them quickly find the mastermind behind the incident. Looking at the people of the Shenlong temple leaving full of killing intent, Li Qin thinks that this Jiangdu is afraid it is about to collapse completely. At the Royal Entertainment Club in the luxurious VIP room, Tran Thu is immersed in the arms of beauties. He generously announces that all expenses for fun today are paid by him completely. The flatterers surrounding him constantly praise the generosity of Tran Thu to please him. The beauty in his arms curiously asks what happened today that the young master is so excited. He replies that the company just escaped financial trouble thanks to a high-level person who requested to hire grave digging with a generous reward. After digging up those 2 graves, he felt uncomfortable in his stomach, so he defecated in it, then took a photo and sent it to that big boss. He was very satisfied, so he rewarded him with around 100 million. He laughs loudly because this money not only helps the company pay off debts but also has plenty to play and enjoy comfortably. A flatterer praises this money as enough to bring the company to the listing floor in a blink of an eye and swears to cling tightly to the thigh of Tran Thu to earn a living. The people around also praise him as a genius because such difficult things can also be thought of. The beauty in his arms pouts and calls him a male god and asks for a lucky money envelope. He is excited and promises to give lucky money to everyone present in this room. He does not know that the main door has been kicked down by someone from the outside. Deep then appears with an icy face along with two confidants with overwhelming killing intent standing right behind him. 3 people walk into the VIP room, making the atmosphere suddenly become cold. That Tran Thu raises his voice to shout and ask who these people are that dare to blatantly rush in here. Deep then does not say a word but nonchalantly sits down on the chair. Hak Long pulls out a sharp knife then slams it down on the table, creating a jarring sound. He speaks up with a cold tone, demanding him to confess the name of the mastermind behind the funding within 1 minute. Tran Thu aggressively stands up, pointing his finger to scold, and assumes that he is just using a knife to threaten him. Immediately the tip of the knife stabs straight into his thigh, making this person scream shrilly because of the pain. The people around are scared and scream, then run away in panic because of fear of being implicated. Hak Long presses the knife deeper, making him painful to the point of trembling. Deep then coldly repeats the question, and the other person has to confess that Vong Sam is the person behind everything. He is scared and begs for mercy because he does not want to die yet. He asks again about the ashes of his parents, where they are. He stammers and confesses that Vong Sam ordered people to take the ashes to hide. Hak Long pulls the knife out of the thigh of the bastard, then turns to ask Deep then whether he can let him live for 5 more seconds. He indifferently agrees, making Tran Thu feel death is approaching and constantly crying and begging. At the Vong family villa, the party is taking place very luxuriously with many guests. A person speaks up, requesting everyone to keep order to welcome the most important character today. Guests wonder who the person whom Vong boss values like that is after all. He answers flatly that it is the head of the family Lam Non Chuang of the Lam family in the capital. The whispers arise because everyone knows that the Lam Group is the #1 enterprise in Longnan country. Everyone is even more surprised when remembering the old master of the Lam family, who is known as Tai Sun Bak Do in the army. People conclude that the two families Vong and Lam have a relationship that is not ordinary, so they sent Lam Non Chuang to attend an engagement ceremony. The Vong family organizes a big party like that to show off their power and affirm a firm position in the world. A luxurious car enters the lobby and Vong boss hurriedly goes out to greet very enthusiastically. He calls Lam Non Chuang brother and asks about the long and hard trip. Lam Non Chuang just hums perfunctorily, then goes straight into the hall with his son Lam Veen. Suddenly a group of people rushes in, making the crowd stir, and the male lead calls the name of Vong Sam directly and majestically. He orders him to crawl here and kneel down to admit his guilt. Vong Sam recognizes Deep then, so he shouts loudly for his subordinates to rush up to kill him. He offers a hot reward of 5 million for anyone who can knock him down. The bodyguards do not know life and death rush up to curse him for daring to come to disturb the party. However, these people are quickly beaten by the people of the Shen Long Temple and collapse on the ground. Vong Sam is scared when seeing his subordinates defeated completely, but still tries to keep his voice. He points his finger toward the Lam family to threaten him and assumes that touching the Vong family is touching the Lam family. Deep then smirks, then looks toward the father and son of the Lam family. Immediately Lam Non Chuang and his son approach to respectfully bow to greet the adult. Vong Sam stands stunned on the spot and is completely confused, not understanding what is happening. The head of the Vong family is also shocked and wonders why Deep then knows the Lam family. He says flatly that we meet again. Lam Veen hurriedly responds and says yes sir. Lam Non Chuang also introduces himself and says that he was sent by his father to come here to listen to his orders. He walks inside majestically, then leaves a message for Lam Non Chuang to send greetings to the old master when returning. He orders Hak Long to clean up this place. Vong Sam has not realized it yet and turns to question his cousin that this is definitely a mistake. He calls his father to look carefully again because he thinks that the brat in front of him is just a useless piece of trash. Hak Long immediately rushes up holding a baton to beat him until his mouth bleeds, then rolls on the ground. Vong Tung Nguyen worries and runs over to hug his son, then shouts to ask Lam Non Chuang about their actions. He declares not to let Deep then leave here safely no matter who he is. He threatens him not to interfere in this matter if he does not want to cut off the relationship. Lam Veen directly shouts back that he does not have the qualifications to talk to his father like that. Lam Non Chuang also coldly informs him that the Lam family will manage this matter strictly to the end. Vong Tung Nguyen yells the name of Lam Non Chuang loudly, then reminds him not to forget that he currently holds power over the Lam group and should not consider himself the representative of the whole family. He also threatens that just one call will ensure everything he does today reaches the ears of old Master Lam. While speaking, he pulls out his phone while he provocatively says to go ahead and do it. With a wicked face, he warns him not to blame him for being unrighteous. Does he think that at the Lam family he no longer has anyone to back him up? Deep then at this moment sits down on the chair pulled out by Hak Long with an easy manner. On the other side of the phone, Vong Tung Nguyen reports to his second uncle that he is acting on his father's orders, but the nephew of Lam Non Chuang is colluding with outsiders to cause trouble. The old uncle screams and demands Non Chuang to apologize to his brother immediately. He responds that he is only following the orders of his father. The other end of the line tells him to wait, then suddenly yells into the phone that the bastard Vong Tung Nguyen wants to die, then go ahead but do not drag him along. He also adds that the person he offended is someone that even the Lam family does not dare to touch. With his arms crossed in front of his chest, Deep then sits majestically in front of him, then majestically questions him if he has finished calling. Vong Tung Nguyen looks at the phone with a dark face because he did not expect that the person who was despised by all of Gyeongdu 5 years ago has now become a figure that the Lam family of the capital does not dare to provoke. He quickly bows his head to express the cancellation of the engagement between his son and Devan to hope that he will raise his hand high and strike lightly. Vong Sam lies on the ground crying, full of self-pity, but cannot do anything. The old man advises his son not to worry because the green forest is still there, so one day he will reclaim this debt. He looks at him with hateful eyes and is determined that one day he will skin him and cut him into 100 pieces. The eyes of Deep then are still as sharp as a knife, then he smirks and asks why he must spare the lives of his father and son. Vong Tung Nguyen cannot stand it anymore and yells to blame him for chasing and killing him just because of an engagement. He coldly orders him to bring the ashes of his parents here, then he will talk further. Hak Long replaces his master to expose the crimes when accusing Vong Sam of digging up the graves of the parents of Deep and then defecating in them. He declares that even if the heavenly king arrives, he cannot save him because he will definitely dismember him to offer to the souls of his parents. Vong Tung Nguyen angrily gives his son a slap, then questions why he committed this heartless act. He does not care about etiquette but kneels down to beg Deep then to spare his son a chance to live. He promises to change his child and wishes to offer all his property for him to handle as he pleases. He coldly asks again if he thinks that he needs money. Vong Tung Nguyen hurriedly waves his hand to deny, then grabs the collar of his son to lift him up to ask for the hiding place of the ashes. Vong Sam only knows how to cry while his father holds something to trade conditions. He speaks sternly and asks him what status he has to negotiate conditions with him. After giving the paper to Hak Long, he says this thing relates to the death of his parents. The male lead stands up with unmatched power, making the chair he just sat on break, then orders him to speak fast. He tries to suppress his fear and tells him to agree to his conditions first. Deep then coldly agrees that he will not kill anyone else. He closes his eyes and recounts that 5 years ago a strange old man came to trade and asserted that in less than a month the Deep family would be bankrupt. He has a guess in his mind but still asks what that old man looked like. Vong Tung Nguyen describes that he had a large stature and a handsome white hair, and especially the red bead necklace on his hand. Deep then clenches his hands into fists and confirms that it is definitely his enemy because that old man has never been lenient to anyone. His face is extremely gloomy, wondering why it has to be him out of all the people in the world. He angrily erupts his power, then roars that he has been tricked into being a puppet for the past 5 years. Vong Tung Nguyen is confused and asks if the adult knows that old man. He answers coldly that it does not relate to him and demands that he tells the whole story. He does not dare to refuse, then tells the old story of the past. At that time the grandfather of the Deep family was the imperial physician of the court, while his father was the national medical saint with extremely miraculous acupuncture techniques. Although he did not believe the words of that old man, but not long after his father was announced to have misdiagnosed the disease, causing someone to lose their life. The clinic of the family was also discovered to be selling fake medicine, then was forced to close, and his father was imprisoned from then on. Vong Tung Nguyen continues to reveal that in that year he once doubted and asked that person directly if the matter of the Deep family was caused by him pulling the strings from behind. That old man did not admit and did not deny, but only spoke vaguely that everything was destined by heaven. The time after that he cured the illness of Demuk Kai, but gave all the credit to that old man to take the opportunity to approach the De family more deeply. After the two families Tu and Vong became close, then he gradually took over the entire market of the opponent. Coming to this, Vong Tung Nguyen affirms that the death of the parents of Deep then definitely relates to that old man, because if not he would not have worked hard to take away their ashes. On the hand of Deep then is the paper recording the address that the person requested to send the ashes to. He immediately recognizes this familiar handwriting is his, then starts to query where he is currently located. Vong Tung Nguyen helps his son stand up, then replies that the ashes were taken by the people of the old man, so the two father and son truly do not know where he is hiding. He does not say anything more, but only calls the name of Hak Long to hand over all the handling of this place to him. The eyes of Hak Long exude a cruel look, then happily receives the order that just handing everything to subordinates is done. Looking at Hak Long holding a short knife and going toward him, Vong Tung Nguyen scolds Deep then as a bastard for promising to spare the lives of his father and son. He replies logically that he accepts to spare their lives does not mean his subordinates must also do the same. He coldly turns his back and walks away, leaving behind a shrill scream echoing from behind. He walks slowly and wonders in his head whether the tragic case of the Deep family 5 years ago really relates to that old man or not. He asks himself how much of the truth he knows and who is the real culprit behind everything. Being busy thinking, then the girl going with him runs to announce the bad news that Demuk Kai suddenly got sick and Tavan took him to the hospital. He immediately orders to drive straight to the hospital to check. At the hospital room of old Tavan is worriedly asking Dr. Duong about the situation of her father. The doctor determines that behind his head there is a very dangerous blood clot, then starts to announce the worst situation that can happen. She is panicked and begs the doctor to save her father at all costs. He says the illness of old Ta can only be helped by the hospital director to study, so he will help her connect, but leans close to her body meaningfully that this matter is not done for free. Thinking he only wants money, so she agrees to meet regardless of the price. He nonchalantly grabs her soft hand, then asserts that he does not lack money but only has a bit of lust. The blatant words make her understand his evil intention, so she immediately pulls her hand back, then straightaway gives him a slap full of anger. The face of the old doctor darkens, then he loudly slanders her for assaulting a doctor. He quickly grabs her hand to pull away and threatens to hand her over to the security team, so she sits in prison. Suddenly the male lead pushes the door to rush in, then coldly questions who is bold enough to dare to push his wife into prison. Tavan softly calls the name of Deep, then making him have to let go of her hand. He points to her face to denounce her for hitting people and asserts that this behavior is illegal. The voice of Deep then rings out evenly, not angry but imposing, making the listener feel cold down the spine that his wife does not hit people without reason except for those who deserve to be hit. At this moment old Ta struggles to sit up and points at the doctor to recount his crimes as a beast. Tavan hurriedly runs to support her father. He tries to use his last breath to recount the matter that this doctor used his life to threaten his precious daughter. He reveals his evil intention with her body, which is truly a damned bastard. His eyes radiate killing intent, no different from the death god coming to claim a life for daring to have intentions with his woman. Looking at him step by step approaching him, he is panicked and stammers to ask what he wants to do. He kicks straight into his face, then coldly declares that he will not be able to die peacefully.